This is Tom Kane, the voice of Yoda in Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
Gorlectopods.
The thought of it. No one understands what you're doing out there.
And when you say no one, I'm assuming you mean Uncle Harlow?
This one's different.
I'm not buying another spider.
This one's free.
What do you want?
You're right. You're not a tourist.
Look at just the conviction numbers we're allowed to see in the places we know are peaceful. An 18% rise in CAIFO, Tapasi 21, a 38% increase in Ghorman. Ghorman of all places.
Ghorman would be a remarkable place to turn our way. I need to know more before we get involved. Bix will be fine.
You don't know that.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Joining us today, a cup of coffee to talk about the 4th episode in Season 2 of Andor. The episode is called Ever Been To Ghorman? Now, I know my two guests pretty well. I don't know that they've ever been to Ghorman, but I do know they've been to Coffee with Kenobi, and I'm very happy to have them back on the show. First, from Fantha Tracks, Mark Newbold. Mark, welcome back to the show, my friend. It's been too long.
It has been a while. Yeah, I didn't realize how long it had been, but I was very pleased to get the invite. So always happy to come and chat.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to your insights. And speaking of insights, I'm also looking forward to the insights. He is a very valued member of the CWK community, always present in the CWK Alliance, the one and only Daz Davies. Daz, welcome back to the show.
It's a Grona team, Dan. It's good to be here. Hello to everybody back home.
Yes. Well, it's a Grona team again to you, all of you. Look, we've got a lot to talk about here on Ever Been to Ghorman, and as we, of course, have been talking about for weeks on Coffee with Kenobi, and as we talked about before, we're going to do our best. Whenever I teach The Hobbit or Harry Potter, for example, several of my students have seen all the films or they've read the books already. What we try to emphasize is, look, we're only going to focus on what is, only on the existing chapter. We'll try not to give any winks and stick ahead because we feel like there's so much richness here. So we're going to stick only to Ever Been to Ghorman. Naturally, everyone's probably seen the entire series multiple times. We're just going to try to do that because I think it will make for much richer conversation. So, Daz, we're going to kick it off with you. Please give me one word to describe your overall thoughts on Ever Been to Ghorman, and just kind of give me a brief synopsis of what you thought of the episode.
Okay, so the word that I've gone for is trauma. The reason for that being that I think this episode perhaps lacks in action, but it makes up for it with a good character insight for each of the main players in the episode. I feel like everybody, all the main characters here are all dealing with their own traumas and are slightly being controlled or making decisions heavily based upon those traumas. I'm thinking Cassian and the losses he's sustained. I'm talking about Bix and perhaps the most obvious traumas where she has had to endure the torture and the abuse in the previous arc. And even if you think about Cyril, who features quite heavily in the episode, I think that he's very much a man who's sort of basing a lot of his decisions based on his trauma, on his home life, on the botch job that came in the previous season. I think a lot of these are guiding his decisions. So I've gone for trauma.
Okay. Well, I think there's plenty there to support that word. Mark, what about you? One word and overall thoughts on the episode.
Oh, I will go for portentous, as in it feels like there's a lot of stuff being set up in this episode. And without casting forward, which of course we are not going to do, it does feel like a lot of the characters, Cyril obviously moving to Ghorman and his situation changing because, of course, we are now 1 year later from that previous batch. So things have moved on in terms of Bix and her own, where she is her own issues. That feels like, especially the way the episode ends, that feels like that's got more things to come. So I think all of the characters, even right down to Lonnie, even down to Partagaz, everybody's got something ahead of them. It just feels like, of course, it's the first of the next sort of trilogy of episodes, so everyone's teeing the next year up. But this one really feels quite hefty, and especially because we're finally at Ghorman, and even without, as I say, casting forward to the future of the season, long-term Star Wars fans and even people who are kind of casually into Star Wars know Ghorman is a big deal within the realms of season 2 of Andor. So I will say portentous. Don't ask me to spell it, but that's the word I'm picking.
Portentious. That is a great word. I love portentous. It's hard to beat either of your words, but I guess I'll go with tense. There's a slowly building tension in this, in galactic scale ways and very intimate interpersonal ways with relationships and a marriage. I don't know that Cyril is married, but it sure seems that they have a very intense relationship that is between the two of them. There's tension with Luthen. Everyone has a degree of tension, and it's just simmering, right? You're turning the stove up, your pot of tea is boiling, or coffee, as it were, and it's just about to get to a fever pitch. And that's exactly the emotion that you have. And as you mentioned, Daz, there is no action in this episode per se, but you don't miss it. You don't crave it. You don't even notice it's not there. In fact, until you said that, Daz, I didn't even realize there was no action in the episode. There's just so much character stuff. And because of all the hard work that Tony Gilroy and the cast and crew have done with Andor, especially with season 2, you dive right into the tension. So let's talk about it. Mark, I'm actually going to start with you. Ghorman, talk to me about the history of Ghorman before Andor season 2, and why is it relevant to Star Wars?
It kind of started from best recollection early days of West End Games back in the early 90s. It was part of one of the, I think it might have been in the Galaxy Guide. I think it was almost certainly in one of the campaigns. And they set out this world, not defined as it is in season 2 of Andor, but it's one of those planets that's kind of been around in the background of the lore, specifically because of this Ghorman massacre that's referred to, which I will not cast forward, but we kind of know that there's this big deal coming, this big whole conflict coming, and they've been very elegant, I think, in the sense that they've taken that original historical moment that Tony Gilroy was talking about so much into season 2, which again, just as a slight offshoot, was very encouraging as a fan of wanting it all to fit together. I think that's what a lot of fans wanted to kind of hang together. The fact that he was relating to and referring to Ghorman massacre, they've kind of shifted it back down the timeline and kind of rejigged it to the Tarkin massacre, but that's a slight sidetrack. Just the way they've worked it in as a world that wasn't hugely defined to my best recollection. And actually, I think when we come out of this episode, even just this episode, in fact, absolutely just this episode, you feel that you've learned so much about this world, just the aesthetic of it, the style of it, the vibe of it, which is something that changes as we go. But nevertheless, you've come out of this episode feeling like Ghorman's now suddenly become a destination. They've defined it so well, which is huge. Hats off to the team. So from a world that was known of, but not tremendously, because it was, as I say, it was sort of a 30-year-old. It could have been a planet in a Star Wars Marvel comic back in the day, really. But just that key event, they've took that as the kernel to sort of grow into this incredible season. So I think they've done a tremendous job in that sense.
I agree, and you're really doing a good job of skirting the boundary of winking ahead. You're that problem child in my classroom, but that's all right. I think I've got your number, mister. Look,
I'm trying my best.
You're doing beautifully, as you always do. Look, Ghorman, thank you for the summation and reminder of that. And that's exactly right. And am I misremembering? Do they mention Ghorman in Star Wars Rebels ever?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they do. I think
feel like
it's a mention.
Daz is shaking his head. Yes, Daz, do you have any information for us?
I believe it was mentioned when Mon Mothma sort of had that scene in Rebels where, pretty much lines up with events around this period. I think that there wasn't much detail given, but yeah, I do think that it was mentioned in dispatches.
I thought so. I thought so as well. So okay, now we're pretty well lined up, and I think that is part of why there's so much delicious tension. So what we like to do when we look at these is I just got a couple of bullet points of things I think are worth talking about, but I'd love to hear from our wonderful guests first. Mark, let's actually, Daz, why don't we start with you? What is one key point that you'd like to bring up about this episode? It doesn't have to be from the beginning; it can be from anywhere and ever been to Ghorman.
A point. Perhaps I'll start at the start. Really, this is the first gap between two arcs that we have in the Andor series. Well, we know that that there's been a storytelling decision made there, and for me, instantly when we went into this episode, we're given the 1 year later on the screen, and I think was it the 3 years BBY. It's an interesting story telling tool, I think, that they've used. Not that to have a year gap, I think that's perfectly fine, but it's going to be interesting to think that there's going to always be that year between each of these arcs, and so with this being the first time it happened, I think it's instantly I was thinking, wow, we've really jumped from one place to another. In terms of like visually, the last time at the end of the first arc, we could see them in these magnificent fields, gold, and then we open up this episode, and we're in Coruscant, but it's very dark. It's shadows. It's like we're really dropped into the episode, and I was wondering how that would feel. And to me, I did find it a little bit disorientating at first, but then it does leave a lot for us to perhaps pick at as we watch the episode, or maybe some stuff for us to fill in with our own headcanon, as it were. But I did think that it was an interesting way to start the episode, and I guess something that we'll have to get used to as we go forwards. I don't know what you guys thought about it.
I've been thinking about this a lot, because I think as I look at it again, the first time I kept thinking, so I know it's been a year, and besides a bit of a change of scenery, I don't really notice a lot of differences in the narrative. Like, if you didn't tell me it was been a year, I don't think I would have noticed or been that invested, because Star Wars is sort of predicated, even from the very, very beginning, of, look, stuff happened before and after. We didn't tell you, but it's there. Trust us, it's important. But they don't ever spill it out. And I would have caught that. It could have been a week. It could have been a month. It could have been a year. It could have been 10 years, honestly. The only way I felt a little lost, and I did like the choice, because there's historical roots in the telling of Star Wars stories through this particular angle. The only thing that really confused me was that there's a lot of mention, especially around their dinner table with Biggs and Cassian, about the death of a soldier, and then it comes out that the soldier is a child. And I kept thinking, is this from season 1? Is this, if I missed something? And then I realized this must be part of the gap. But I mean, is that what you both thought as well?
Yeah, I agree. I like, weirdly though, I think with Andor, more than any other Star Wars show, I kind of like being a little bit disorientated, because I think they construct the show, certainly going from so I interviewed Alistair Petrie at the weekend, and he spoke about when it was originally being planned out, and they were talking 6 seasons, and then it was 5, and then of course it became 2. So of course they've truncated all these storylines into these 3 episode blocks. So that by nature means you're not deep diving in 12 episodes into those 3 episodes of real estate, if you like, and you're going to get the gaps. I think Lucasfilm must be thrilled to bits, because we can stick an animated series there, we can do a book there, Marvel can do a series there. There's all this real estate they can fill in. But as a casual viewer, it would be more disorientating than having a moment where you're going, have I seen this before? And you're dredging it, like you just say, Danny, you're kind of dredging your mind to think, have I seen it? And then pretty quickly, no, this is new. So for us, it's a quick pivot, but I think for other fans, it might be a little bit trickier. But nevertheless, it's where where do you draw the lines on exposition, on feeling like you've missed something, or you've not missed anything? You'll pick it up. There's always those beats that you'll kind of fill in the gaps yourself, like Daz says. There's certain elements that you pick up yourself. But I kind of like that. So, but only really with this show, because it feels so vast, and also weirdly because it is such a, in the best sense, a lot of it is a talking head show. It's not piles and piles of action. So I like the thought that you have got to give it that second, third, fourth watch to really pull out the best of it.
Well said. Well said. I agree with that. And I think it does add a layer of, if you're a little bit not in the know, then you feel like the characters are. And I think that's a really very impressive way to tell a story. Mark, what's a key point that you think is important that we should bring up?
Quite how much the Empire doesn't trust the Empire. By that I mean no two people in that organization have any trust for the guy next to them or the woman next to them, and it really stands out in season 2. You've always felt that Imperials by nature will happily push the next guy or gal under the bus, but you see it in real time in Andor. So even this sequence in this episode where Partagaz is still bossing the room at ISB headquarters and everybody's reporting in, and actually the only strong link that unites any of them is Lonnie, and we know Lonnie is playing the long game. So even there, you kind of think he's only doing that because there's a means to an end that he's trying to drag out. As Luthen says, I need to know what the big, I can't remember the exact phrase, but he's basically, I need to know what the end result is. I need to know what the end game is. Yes. What's this all about? And that's way off at this point. But Lonnie's trying to pull it out. He's the only guy that's he's on Hart's side. He's on, forgive me, I forget the other senior Imperial's name, but who gets a bit of a carpeting from Partagaz. But he's the one that's trying to keep them together. But the rest of them, Dedra and Hart are just. Whereas last season it was late night, let's get some pizzas in and figure this thing out. Now it's so not that. So that's what stuck out to me, is just how divisive, how dog eat dog the Imperial ranks are, and you've got to assume it goes fairly high, probably up to old Anakin himself, and even then, yeah.
Daz, want to weigh in on that at all?
Yeah, well, the only thing I was going to mention about that scene in particular that Mark was talking about was, gosh, didn't the actress who plays Dedra, is it Denise Goff? Wasn't it incredible facial acting where she has this mix of interest, indifference, disgust, and like a peak of interest when she hears Axis mentioned, and she barely moves her head. It's all in her eyes and her mouth. I thought, what an amazing piece of acting with absolutely no speech at all. That really stood out to me in that scene. I thought, bravo, that was brilliant.
It truly is a masterclass, isn't it? In performance, it may go. Her performance may go down as one of the more elite ones in the history of Star Wars, honestly, and rightfully so. And to your point, Mark, I agree, and it makes you laugh a little bit. We have plenty of history from around the entire world, the real world, of the problems that occur when we don't trust, when we don't know that the man or woman to our left or right has our back, so to speak, or that we can count on them. And then everyone is always one-upping one another. It's like a pool of piranhas. And of course they can't trust each other. And yet it managed to survive and thrive in the face of great hate and distrust and just selfish interests. Led by the Emperor, who is the most selfish and self-motivated person in this entire saga. So it's really, really fascinating. I think the place I want to start is with Cassian and Bix. Now, the first arc, if I didn't know any better, whenever she would reference Cassian as her husband, I thought that was a cover for protection to keep that Imperial creepy lunatic away from her. And even at the end, the way they embrace, I thought, well, these are very close people. There's an intimacy there. But then this starts and they're lying in what you can only presume is a marital bed together. And I thought, okay, they are together. And their dynamic, we get very powerful scenes with them. We see her great PTSD, her great anxiety, her great suffering from what she had to go through in season 1. And the nightmares that come from that, to the point of her potentially becoming violent. Now she has a blaster, and in her dreaming / hallucination, she's going to shoot. Well, that would certainly tip off a lot of people. Cassian stops her. Clearly, it's not the first time. He's loving, he's patient, but he also is not willing to back down. And he wants to attack it directly, but he still respects her. And then and there's that frustrating moment where she's like, even though she appears to be like not quite fully, lucent, she says, look, if this is a war and you keep telling me that it is, and I believe you, I think you're right, but I want to win. And his look at her when that happens, Cassian is fascinating in this regard. For all of his bravado and his toughness and his charge through any wall, he's also very reluctant to kind of wind up his own motor. And because he wants to keep her safe. And we're all married. There's nothing more important than that, right? Than caring for your wife, caring for your family. And the fact that he has the dynamic, he wants to bring her with him when Luthen gives him this task at the end of the episode, is really cool. And they have, when they part, there's this wonderful moment of intimacy that was so beautiful and so intoxicating. And it wasn't salacious. It wasn't lascivious. It didn't require anything that would be PG-13 or that you couldn't watch with your children. They might have some questions, and I don't know that I would watch it with a kid. But just there, there's so much love and intimacy there. And the way they express it, I thought that was just so breathtaking to experience. And it was an experience that I was very drawn to it.
You make a really good point about that moment. I think that, to me, when I was watching them, it was almost like a close quarters, sort of almost like a dance, really. And I felt for that moment, I feel like that they managed to shut out the rebellion. They managed to shut out the war. This was the pure heart, I would say, of their relationship. This is why they have a relationship. You strip all the other complications away, and I think you get this visual representation of this is how they still have a relationship, and that it endures in the harshest of circumstances. So that was how I saw that. And yeah, it was shortly after Cassian leaves, and it really did leave me with a bit of a lump in my throat, because throughout the episode up to that point, they've been going back and forth about these issues. I think that Cassian is wrestling in particular with the relationship. He's contradicting himself continuously. On one hand, he's talking about the death of the young soldier. This is war. This is what happens. You put on that uniform. This is, you play the game. Play silly games, win silly prizes was kind of the sentiment that he was trying to push. But I'm not even sure he was really believing his own words. But then on the other hand, he's so protective at this point of Bix that it completely goes against what he's saying, because she's a soldier just on the other side. But however, he's really struggling with putting her in harm's way at all. He's avoiding it as much as possible. She says, that would you have shot him, or was the reason he shot him because he saw my face? So they've been going back and forth with this. I don't think really Cassian sort of resolves it by the end of the episode, but I think that sort of time runs out, so to speak, and he's got to go. That was my read on their relationship.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think their moment together that you refer to, Dan, I think it was very Phyrexian. I think that was personal to their culture. That was their thing. It was almost a bit like, as an analogy, a bit like when peacocks are presenting to. There was just a pageantry about that, just what they were doing which I really like, because that's very much a thing. The Ferrix thing, Stone and Sky, that's just a very personal thing to them and the Ferrixians in the show. So, and also it's a great throwback to season 1 as well. Any mention of Ferrix, and of course we've lost Brasso now, so that's a huge moment. But yeah, their relationship is, I think, because Bix has sort of said we've known each other forever, so they've grown up together. They've either been friends or they've been on and off boyfriend girlfriend as kids. You get the vibe that they've always been in and around each other's relationships. And I think it's such a strong relationship that Cassian can be annoyed and very frank and as Daz says, not actually make sense every consecutive sentence. He always contradicts himself. And she knows him so well that she knows it's coming from the right place, that they're both in this war together. Cassian says in Rogue One, I've been in this war since I was 6 years old. Well, so's Bix, to different degrees. And you can say that of a lot of characters. You can say that about Jin. You can say that about a lot of different characters in their own way. But I think she understands him well enough to know that even when, as he says, one thing about the soldier and a different thing about Bix, and she's ready to fight, he gets annoyed when she's, more involved than he kind of wants her to be. It's all from a place of love. They've got a relationship. The great parallel is Dedra and Cyril compared to Cassian and Bix. That's the great comparison, really. But not the only one. But that's the big one. And I just think it shows the strength of their relationship, that she can be frank with him and he can be as irritated as you see him, but she reads the message of what he's trying. He can't always verbalize it. It's through his emotions he speaks louder, really, quite often.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the only other thing I want to say about that is, I feel like in any other show, not any, but in several other shows, that moment would be cheapened by, like I said, more of a PG-13 expression of love. And the fact that it wasn't, it felt so authentic to me that there was a part of me that's like, wow, is this even acting? This is so beautiful. So I really, really, really appreciate it. I think it speaks volumes about both the whole episode. There's a legitimacy and authenticity to this relationship where both have a shared trauma, but also a history together that I really love.
I'd just like to say, Dan, I'd love to know the actors, whether or not that was something that was completely choreographed on script or whether it was something that they worked out together, because it felt, as you say, it felt very real and very, a thing. It felt like something they maybe worked out as actors.
Yes, an excellent question.
If I could just jump in as well, Mark, you made a point about the parallels of relationships, and I don't know about you guys, but as Star Wars fans, when I hear about Cassian fearing loss of people close to him, my Star Wars alarm bells were ringing loud, and I was thinking, oh, we've been here before. I, of course, go to think about Anakin and his fear of losing Padme, and comparing the two relationships, and whatever the outcome is, I think perhaps the difference is that Cassian and Bix are talking this out and they're wrestling with it together. And I suppose, we've covered it a million times, but perhaps if Anakin had, been able to put it more out there, perhaps it would have been a different outcome then. But
I agree. If only you were there to help steer the way. Yes, I agree. Well, Daz, what's the next thing that you thought would be worthy of a topic here?
It's Cyril for me. He comes into the episode quietly. We're introduced to to Ghorman, and it almost instantly drop in on Cyril's story. It's quiet. He's getting ready to go to work. And for me, I saw him quite different in this episode. I saw that he was straight away. Of course, we saw in the first season that he likes to, dress his uniform nice and smart, and it's fitting that he just happens to have fallen on his feet with this, where he's literally on a planet renowned for its fine clothing, and he looks super smart, and
he looks the part.
He really does. He is the perfect man for this. This outing, I'd say, and instantly I start getting these sort of spy vibes. He notices out the window that he's being watched, and Well, on my first viewing, I thought, "Oh, is this Cyril being a little bit overly cautious?" But upon repeat viewing, no, he was definitely being watched through the window, and I love it. He's quite suave in this scene. He closes the window quite calmly, carries on, and later on, of course, we learn that he's very aware of all this happening, but he pulls the cord around the door. It felt like an old-fashioned spy movie. I really enjoyed it, and I loved the aesthetic of Ghorman. Skipping between Coruscant and Ghorman throughout this episode, I don't think there was ever any confusion about where we were. No. It was a beautiful looking place and sort of fit in with the sort of story of the place and how it's supposed to be. I also noticed the detail of when he was speaking with Dedra on this sort of secret hall, that behind him the tiling on the wall was like a hexagonal cells, similar to a hive. And in the public meeting, they mentioned that I presumably the spiders that produce the materials work within a sort of a hive environment. And I thought, wow, the little touches are great. So for me, I feel like Cyril was thriving here. I think he's a different Cyril overall at this point, perhaps on slightly shaky legs, so we don't know how firm a standing he's going to have. But generally, I thought that he went about his work really well. He was convincing, and he was a surprisingly good actor. If indeed he is acting, it wasn't always clear, to the point that I was doubting, especially in his conversations with the Ghorman people they're meeting. He really has me thinking. He maybe he believes in this cause. I could completely buy that. So Cyril for me. What did you guys think of him in this episode?
Go ahead, Mark.
Cyril, totally. He seems the most at ease, I think, that we see him in the whole 2 seasons. He likes the place. He clearly likes the place. He's finally got a role of, at least to his mind, of some importance. And of course, we know he's there for reasons, but nevertheless, he's in charge of a particular group of people. He's as fastidious and organised as ever, which is great. And the conversation with his mom, which is always a joy, hearing Edie in any scene. He's now got the confidence after the infamous meal to sort of, and you've got to assume there's been a year's worth of, this is the 52nd once a week phone call, so he's quite clear at letting mom, know where he is, what he's thinking. He's very firm. He cuts her off at the end, which is a nice little, whatever you want to call it, little snub or just power play or whatever, or I've had enough, mom, goodbye, see you next week. So I even like that. So I think he's, in terms of the whole Ghorman front and speaking to Rylands and the whole conversations there, he's curious. I mean, I think because he likes the place and he's not fully up to speed with everything in the way that Dedra is, when they have that phone call, she's, are you going to tell Partagaz? No. Baby steps, so she's used to this. She's in that world of, ISB world, spycraft and all that stuff. That's second nature to her, and the information she would discern and filter through. To him, it's all new. He's suddenly turned up in, the Spy Who Loved Me, isn't he? So he's happy in this new world, putting his little, Sean Connery threads across the door and all that stuff. It's part of his daily routine, clearly. And as you say, Daz, seeing the stuff out the window and all of that. So I think he's quite excited by that. So at this point, before we reach any kind of tipping point, he can go to a town hall and just listen like any concerned neighbour would listen. There's no crime against that at this point. And of course, you kind of know that's kind of what Partagaz and Dedra want, because he's the unwilling patsy in this scenario. But I don't think he even considers that. I think he's quite happy. So, Cyril is I think he's in the best place that you probably see him in the whole 2 seasons of the show.
So I think you're going to say nobody does it better when you mentioned The Spy Who Loved Me.
Damn it.
Well, it's okay. I'll just edit it so you did. Look, what I like about Cyril here, this was the first time when I watched him where I wasn't cringing. And I think that's by design, because I don't think he is cringing. Whatever has happened the past year, I think we have a good measure because of the way that Dedra takes control of the dynamic with him and his mother, at the end of season 1 of episode 3. So there's a confidence there. He is in charge now. He is in charge of a large office of people. He does have purpose. He does have intent. He feels like his knowledge and experience and his wherewithal is valued, and he's able to put it into action. The conversation you mentioned with his mother, both of you, was very important because there was a time through most of what we know of Cyril where that conversation would have had him laying on his bed in this weird, awkward pretzel position for hours. But it doesn't even faze him. Even like her insults, which are still there, she still mentions Uncle Harlow, but he doesn't react, doesn't bat an eye, because he's got more important things to do. So he's not controlled by that enmeshment, and that's huge. But more than that, what I like about Cyril in this is that we have a character who was extremely, as much as anyone in this series, probably more than anyone in this series, black and white. It's either this way or it's that way. My suit is pressed. My hair is perfectly coiffed. I'm completely clean shaven. My shoes are polished. I have my briefcase. I'm at work from the morning till very, very much at the end of the night when there's nobody in the courtyard. And yet, when he goes into this meeting, this beautiful meeting with a lot of tension and passionate acting and performances, you start to see a glimmer of doubt, of gray, of thinking, is there a middle ground here? No, that can't be, because the Empire is good and everything else is bad. Rebellions are bad. But you see just briefly that he starts to consider other alternatives, and it becomes very nuanced in that regard. Instead of some patsy, he becomes someone who starts thinking about things differently. Now, it doesn't take hold, but seeds are planted, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't think I would say it until this episode, but I've become quite a bit of a Cyril fan in this particular episode. Which
me too.
Coming from where he's been previously, who'd have thought it? But you could argue that Dedra has been good for Cyril, although it's a very unorthodox.
So far, it seems that way.
Yeah. Everything. We saw that scene with the infamous meal with the mum, and I feel like that was a real turning point for him. I think that he had virtually given up, and when he came back into that room, I think that a lot changed for him, and I think that whether it was completely intentional on Dedra's point, I think she did exactly what was needed. I would say yes, she probably did know what she was doing, and knowing how she's very computing in the way she thinks, she probably saw the mum being something that was getting in her way, and she just took it off the board. And now we're seeing the fruits of that decision.
Absolutely. Mark, feel free to comment on that, or if not, I'd love to hear your next topic of interest.
Topic of interest would be Ghorman itself, I think. The whole propaganda that's been spilled out across the galaxy about this world, which, as we've said, it's not the fashion capital of the galaxy, but certainly the material is highly regarded. So it's known. It's one of those worlds that would be known in many circles, maybe not on Tatooine, but other places they would be well aware of Ghorman. And so just to see from the early episodes with the Imperial meeting that the whole plan to bad name, I guess, Ghorman as a world, and just pick on the arrogance, the perceived arrogance. And I mean, it's very clear they've gone all in on the French influence, the resistance influence. There's no, it's almost Filoni-like in that they've picked a specific tone, and this is the thing that we're going for. It's very much on the nose in that sense, but with enough of a twist that it's not distracting. Daz will know this. Here in the UK, we had a show called Hello, Hello, and this could have become Hello, Hello. Google it. And so they could have gone that route, and it doesn't. It just about keeps it away from that to the point where it becomes actually useful as an influence on the story as opposed to a distraction. But Ghorman itself, I think now worldwide, globally, galactically rather, you can see even in the things that Edie says, and you pick up on the propaganda that she's being fed. So, and she's almost like a filter or a litmus test for what's broadly being spewed out everywhere. And even in the Star Wars galaxy, they watch, junk TV, they listen to junk radio. There's pop. There's not, the Neomos music starts off as music at the beachfront in season 1. It ends up at the wedding in season 2. It's lift music by the end of it. So, you just see the progression of all these sort of cultural zeitgeist things, even within the galaxy. It's a very small scale thing, but you see it. And people gossip. So I love that, the Empire is savvy enough, even though there's lots of bickering and infighting, they're savvy enough to use this as a weapon. They weaponize that as much as they're weaponizing the Death Star to many degrees, because you've got to assume that as things progress and certain worlds like Alderaan, outside of the rebellion, is there galactic sympathy for Alderaan, to the scale that you would imagine there would be if the Empire hadn't kind of got their propaganda fingers on it. So I think there's bigger things to think about, and Ghorman is just a small, within what we're talking about, sort of a small example of how they can twist perfectly harmless, as they sort of say, we're a single item economy, essentially. It's all about the spiders and the Ghorman twill, and that's us. There's nothing else we have, but we're really good at this. Well, that's now undermined, and so I just think that was a really interesting thing to sort of watch, and obviously will progress.
Yeah, I love that. I love both of your thoughts there. And it's Ghorman is actually going to lead to my next point. And it's the spiders themselves. So we know that the spiders, of course, make the thread. And that's a beautiful sort of an image, because the spider can do that. That's a real world application, right? That we can dive into that.
Yeah.
But the English teacher in me, I know it's summer, but that doesn't matter. The clock's always on. And I start thinking to myself, what do these spiders symbolize? Why a spider? Yes, you get the thread, and that's one way, but Tony Gilroy's smart. He could have come up with a million other scenarios, but we have Ghorman spiders. So in my thought process, and I'm not saying that I'm right, I'm probably not, but to me, the Ghorman spider is a symbol. What does a spider do, right? In essence, a spider, while some are poisonous, if you bother them, they're not egregious animals. They don't have that kind of thought. They're just instinctual. In fact, my son was saying to me, "Dad, why do spiders bite people?" And I said, well, think about this. A spider, what does a spider do? Like we learn in the film Jaws, what do sharks do? They swim around, although spiders don't swim. And they make other little sharks, or they make other little spiders, right? That's what they do. So they have to eat to do that. How do they do that? They spin a web, big old web, and stuff gets trapped in it, and they climb up their little thing, and they kill the bug, right? So then I'm thinking, all right, so the Empire is taking this world with spiders, and they've laid out their trap, and they play the long game. Ghorman's been there for a while. We learned that from that underground meeting. And we learned that, look, this place where we think they're going to build an armory, this is actually sacred land, because this is where Grand Moff Tarkin killed, what do they say, 500 unarmed protesters?
Yeah.
So they're laying, it's a trap being laid. Everyone's sticking right into it. And it's pretty scary. Some spiders consume their own, and we're seeing that too. It's fascinating, and I can extend this metaphor more clearly as we go through each episode that it takes place on Ghorman, but I'm going to leave it right there and just kind of put out those feelers.
That's an interesting thought. That, yeah. I don't think even though they're spiders, to me they feel more like mammals than arachnids. Weirdly. I'm not convinced that they're necessarily direct sort of transposition of I know we've seen spiders in, what was it, Caravan of Courage, and obviously the Knobbly spiders, the Macquarie stuff, and things in Mando.
Rebels, yeah.
And Rebels, yeah. So we've seen plenty of spiders or arachnid type creatures, But these ones, to me, feel almost like you could pick them up, stroke them, and they'd be like gerbils. They'd be kind of cool. And there was another little weird comparison. Daz mentioned the quiet room where Dedra and Cyril have their phone call and the hexagonal stuff in the background. I don't know if you noticed, but when Cyril gets given the spider this time with the message inside and he opens it up, if you look at the rim around the sort of the thorax of the spider, it's little hexagonal spaces. So I just wonder whether that's another thing that's sort of being coded in there that we, that to sort of push that sort of thought process further. So
I love it.
Oh, well, I may as well throw mine into the hat, the ex-biology teacher in me.
Oh, beautiful.
Another thing I was thinking about on the theme of spiders and the story that is unfolding is that the female of the species of the spider will often be considerably bigger, dominant, whereas the male will be small, insignificant, and for once its purpose is past, it will be devoured. And well, it got me thinking very much of both Cyril the spider and Dedra pulling all the strings for him. So another connection.
Interesting. That seems like a good thing to talk about in a future episode. I like that.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is
I feel like we've hit a lot of the key ideas. I think it would be neat to sort of wrap this up and get our letter grades for the episode. And if you have any last minute things you want to throw on there, please do. But Daz, we'll start with you. Last minute thoughts and a letter grade for the episode Ever Been to Ghorman.
Well, looking back on this episode, trying to come up with a grade, I think initially I was distracted by as we discussed, the lack of action. And straight away I started thinking, well, the grade for this can't be too high because, well, on the face of it, what happens, And I was thinking, oh, maybe, but it is Andor, the whole, it's always great, let's be honest. I think an A- perhaps. And then upon a bit of reflection, I thought, no, why am I giving this A-? This, for me, is doing exactly what it's setting out to do. It's setting us up for the rest of the arc. Does that perfectly. Going out of this episode, we know exactly where all the pieces are on the board. But also, we often bemoan the lack of character development, and I feel like there was bucket loads in this. So it's a solid A for me on this one.
Wonderful. Mark, what about you?
I very much agree. It's a solid A for me as well. Because it's the start of that new arc, it picks up from where we've sort of left off. But as you say, we're a year later, and it's difficult. We know Ghorman is so integral to this season, and this is where the Ghorman stuff really kicks off. It's been alluded to before, it's been spoke about before, but here we are. And to tee up what's coming, to end with Luthen basically saying to Cassian, "You're going to Ghorman," and and the whole scenario with Bix and her issues, and just everybody's picked up in one place and dropped off in another. That's what I like about Andor, is that there's no wasted motion. Everybody is very rarely left where they were found. I suppose even if you look back to season 1, Marva is the one character in season 1 that is always on Ferrix. She's the Ferrixian. She's there, and there's certain people around her on that world. But then there's people like Brasso who's moving around helping Cass, and there's other people who are, even the guy in the shipyard was busy and doing stuff. But Marva's very sedentary in that sense because she's sort of the anchor of that community, and her loss is so heavily felt. Her own annoyance that why wasn't I braver sooner rings even louder than it might if it was a character that was up in arms and throwing bricks at people. So, there's a strength in that. And so here in season 2, Cyril's moved from Coruscant. He always wanted to get back to Coruscant, or at least his mom kind of told him he did. And there's all these other characters that are busy, now Bix and Brasso and Willman and those guys are on Mina Rao, or not where you left them. Everybody's moving. And so this episode feels like, again, now Bix and Cassian are living in that infamous apartment on Coruscant. They're moving, and Dedra's moved across, maybe not a promotion, but she sort of moved off the axis thing, and Hart's moved forward. So everybody's moving around. Lonnie's not as quiet as he was in season 1. He's a lot more involved in season 2. Clearly his voice is heard at that table in a way that it probably wasn't in season 1. And there's missing faces from that table as well. So there's the passage of time. So I just like the fact that it's moving us forward. As Daz says, you know, it's not action heavy. Personally, I don't care that it's not action heavy. I like it when the action dots in. It's interesting and it's effective. But in terms of Star Wars, it's a bit like Hawkeye a few years ago when you had the two characters, you know, Yelena and Kate. I think it's Kate.
Yes,
talking head to head, and you just had that whole conversation head to head thing, and nothing was happening. It was just all inference, just the two of them, and it was electric. Andor is that to me 12 times over in every season. It doesn't. I don't need to see AT-ATs. I'll wait for Mando and Grogu for that. I'm excited as anything for that. But in Andor, it works that it's more thought provoking, more chess. It's a game of chess, not a game of checkers. So I do enjoy that.
Lovely. Well, I knew you two would be just excellent to talk about with this one. I'm going to give it an A+. I prefer this episode over episodes 1, 2, and 3. I think, as I mentioned at the top of the show, that I didn't even notice there was no action until Daz pointed it out, and it just gripped me. I was more invested in this than I have been in the other episodes, and I loved the other episodes. I was really intrigued by them. But this brings it to 11, as it were. Thank you, Spinal Tap. And I was very intrigued because of all the character stuff. And as I said on Rebel Base Card, when we did our synopsis of the entire thing, this series doesn't waste any moments. Every character beat has purpose, has a long game in mind, and they interweave together like the web of a spider. And I think that is great. And I'm not letting that metaphor go. I'm going to take it. I'm going to write a paper on it. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Gentlemen, it was great. Absolutely fantastic to talk with you both. So grateful for any time we get to spend chatting with one another. Daz, really love to get a chance to catch up with you. Where can people reach out to you online to continue the conversation?
I think probably the best place to find me is on Instagram. I'm at Daz Davies and the number 1 after it. I'm forever posting some rubbish on there, so feel free to come and have a look. Yeah, that's the best place to find me, I'd say.
Love it. And I loved all of your posts and your videos from Japan. Looked like it was quite an incredible experience.
Amazing.
Love it. And Mark, of course, it's always an incredible blessing to chat with you. You're just so integral to the world of Star Wars and fandom, and we just love what is going on with Fantha Tracks. Please share all the good work that you and your friends are doing.
Yeah, fanthatracks.com, at Fantha Tracks on pretty much all the socials. Busy with the site and with the socials, and obviously with the podcasts and the YouTube channel. So loads and loads going on over there. And if you want to chat to me, not that you would, but if you did, prefect_timing at all the socials and prefect timing on Blue Sky. So but I'm always out there for a chat or a nudge or whatever.
And just like that, our journey through the galaxy for today has come to a close. Thank you so much for joining me here at Coffee with Kenobi, the place where thoughtful Star Wars conversations pair perfectly with your favorite cup of coffee. Whether you're on the go, relaxing at home, or sipping caffè at your favorite corner of the galaxy, I'm truly grateful you chose to spend part of your day with me. And by the way, if you're in the Orlando Walt Disney World area on Father's Day, June 15th, at Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar at Disney Springs, I am having a Coffee with Kenobi meetup for anyone who can join us. It starts at 7:30, probably lasts a couple hours. It's family friendly. It is free admission. We would love to see you. If you're in the area or happen to be on vacation at that time, be sure to stop by Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar at 7:30 to 9:30 and meet me and members of the Coffee with Kenobi family. For all things Star Wars news, reviews, videos, and more, head to our home base, coffeewithkenobi.com. And a special thank you to our official travel partner, MEI Travel and Mouse Fan Travel. Looking to plan your next magical vacation at Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or even a Disney cruise? Want to explore Galaxy's Edge or attend Star Wars Celebration? Becky Mankin and her team will get you there with a no-cost, no-obligation quote and the kind of peace of mind we all appreciate. Learn more at coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. And speaking of Mouse Fan Travel, we're just less than 2 weeks away from the CWK Coffee with Kenobi Disney Wish Cruise. I cannot wait to go on the cruise with all of you who are joining us, and look for plenty of coverage. Don't forget to join the CWK Cafe on Facebook.com at coffeewithkenobi.com/community. It's our family-friendly, spoiler-free group for all Star Wars thoughts, comments, and conversation. This podcast is possible thanks to the incredible support of the CWK Alliance. To help keep the show brewing, for as little as $1 a month, you can join the CWK Alliance and get access to CWK Prover, our weekly exclusive audio and video podcast. All-Star and Grandmaster members get even more exclusive content, including a monthly live video call with yours truly. Learn more at coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance. And know this, 10% of your monthly support goes directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital. Want to connect? You can email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com. Follow me on X at Mr. Zehr, MRZEHR, Instagram, Threads at DanZerCWK, and Blue Sky. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can follow Coffee with Kenobi across social media, X, Instagram, Threads, Pinterest, and Blue Sky, and give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll find over 700 videos, including past live shows, events, and the audio of this podcast. If you get a chance, please take a moment to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It truly helps more Star Wars fans find our little corner of the galaxy. Do you need a speaker for your next event? Visit danzmedia.com. I love to talk mythology, leadership, storytelling, or tailor something unique for your audience. Grab your CWK gear at coffeewithkenobi.com/shop and show your support in style. I'm talking mugs, hoodies, t-shirts, baseball hats, phone cases. There's just so much stuff. Magnets. Yeah, magnets as well. Again, coffeewithkenobi.com/shop. A huge thank you again to Mark Newbold and Daz Davies for joining me today for a virtual cup of coffee. I'm so grateful to them for sharing their time and talents, and grateful to you for joining me each and every week. I'm Dan Zehr, and this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.